shit to you.
The Spider-Man costume is design perfection. It is intricate, it's carefully designed, everything flows, and it's frankly just inspiring to look at. Steve Ditko is and always will be one of my all-time heroes for designing this absolutely gorgeous costume. And you know what else is truly beautiful about this costume? It doesn't matter what race you are, what you look like, if you put on this costume, you can only be Spider-Man. Because this suit covers the entire body. When it came time to reboot Spider-Man for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, obviously it was going to be a challenge to come up with a new Spider-Man costume that could be just as accurate and just as wonderful as the Spider-Man costumes that came before it. The Amazing Spider-Man 2, the previous Spider-Man movie, could only be a tough act to follow in one regard, and that was down to the absolutely astonishing job they did of the Spider-Man costume. Marvel Studios had to do something different in order to establish this new Spider-Man on his own 2 feet. But if you're too different from the Amazing Spider-Man 2 costume, you're probably very different from Spider-Man, surely. Well, Marvel Studios enlisted the help of a miracle worker with Ryan Meinerding as the concept artist for Spider-Man Homecoming, and all of Spider-Man's designs in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But designing such a phenomenal costume came with a lot of trial and error, so we're going to look at the different Spider-Man costumes that didn't make it into Spider-Man Homecoming, so we can see some of the journey that it took to get to where we are today. So sit back, relax, subscribe if you haven't already. Let's check out the unused costume designs of Spider-Man Homecoming. And for today's installment, we'll be looking exclusively at the Stark suit. This was the suit that needed to win us over. It was the suit that needed to sell us on the new Spider-Man. So this first suit here, while a drastic departure from the Amazing Spider-Man 2 style of costumes, still keeps things relatively faithful. The form of this suit is very different from the form of the suit that we'd go on to see in Homecoming itself, as the red section takes up much more of the chest, but a lot less of the tummy region, kinda giving this Spider-Man a bit more of a top-heavy look. And that is, of course, to accommodate for this giant spider on the chest, which I guess would bleed over onto the back, and I'm not sure how they would pull that off, as we don't appear to have a back view of this costume. While the spider is much bigger, and the legs are much longer, swamping the entirety of his upper torso, the center of the spider still takes on the same design aesthetic that was used in the final design, and the legs do remain pretty angular. It definitely appears that they wanted to incorporate a little bit more black onto this costume from the get-go, with lots of black on the hands and the giant black spider, and it appears that the Spidey belt is black at the very rear of it. The blue this time is made up of different shades, and it appears much more layered than it was in the final design. Altogether, a much darker shade of blue. The web shooters on the wrists are a lot less subtle and they're now silver, and Spidey's utility belt is accentuated this time with a cut-off from where the red goes to the belt section and no webs on the belt. The web cartridges on said belt are now red too, and the eyes, rather than being white, are instead mirrored. Personally, I don't like this costume anywhere near as much as the one that they went for in the end. The logo really swamps this one, but the spider's central body is almost kind of too small for the legs around it. I can certainly see why this one they didn't really go for. It's by no means a bad design, but certainly not what I'd be looking for. So this next one here takes a complete departure from the classic Spider-Man in favor of the superior Spider-Man's costume, which was clearly inspired by Alex Ross's original concept design for Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. I'm gonna start with the subtle details first. The web lines here, they're doubled up like they are on the final costume, but it's much more accentuated that they've been doubled up. It creates a much more layered web look. I'd definitely say that's a bit too much for me personally. Like, if you separate the webs too much and make them too textured, it almost ends up looking like a quilt. I do think the design of the superior Spider-Man was a brilliant design for Spidey. It's a much meaner look for the wall crawler though, and I think that's definitely not what they were going for with Spider-Man Homecoming. They definitely remedy this by having the expressive, happy-looking eyes that they have on the final suit, and they're here too. They're certainly not as glassy and angular as the Superior Spider-Man eyes were in the comic books. This is actually a really nice update of the Superior Spider-Man design though, as the black sections are now more layered by having a grey section there too, and you can kind of see the outline of a classic Spider-Man suit. Once again, there is some emphasis on Spidey's utility belt by having the design kind of cut off around the belt region, and we can see that the red web cartridges cartridges are present. I'm a bit unsure about having the palms of the hands be red. I would personally say just make the fingers red. When Screen Rant made an article about this costume, they said it was the Miles Morales costume. That's cute. It does appear that they did a number of color tests with this Spider-Man as well, with another one taking on more of the black sections, which is actually closer to the original Superior Spider-Man design. Gone are the gray layers, and gone are the red web cartridges. But if you are more fond of Spider-Man in his red and blue, fret not, because they even did a version with blue on it. And it's very, very subtle, and I really like that having the blue in there actually really does emphasize the outline of the classic Spidey suit too. This no longer feels like a suit Doc Ock would make, but it feels like the kind of thing Peter would sport now. So I wouldn't mind seeing something like this for a future film. Just ditch the quilt-like webs. So this one here is a black variation of the first suit that we did in this list. And I'd say that when you take Spider-Man and make the blue bits black, you definitely need something in there to break up the red. Otherwise, it can kind of just look like a Spider-Man costume with the lights off. And the red and black on tighter areas like the arms can be a little too contrasting. This next one is definitely more Alex Ross inspired than the previous Superior Spider-Man version, in that the big spooky scary spider of the Superior Spider-Man version is replaced with a smaller, more traditional spider, which actually looks very Todd McFarlane inspired. As well as that, the red is more consistent throughout this costume, with red web shooters, red cartridges, and red piping going all throughout the costume. Another interesting little tidbit is if you notice here on the boots there is actually red webbing on there. Sounds like there's a Miles Morales inspiration on here. So this one here is clearly very Ben Reilly inspired, and I've really never been a fan of the Ben Reilly Spider-Man. So immediately this is not what I would go for in a Spider-Man suit, but I do like the more dense webbing. And I think this is one of the first concepts on here to opt away from the mirrored lenses and go for the white ones instead, which I definitely prefer. Like Ben Reilly, there's a big spider on the chest which wraps its legs all around Spidey's body, and if that doesn't sound a bit kinky, I don't know what does. I feel like the central spider's body needs to be a bit bigger though. And also there's just too much blue going on here. We have a variant here that swaps the blue out for black, and it's very clear that Ryan Miederding was very committed to the possibility of a red and black Spider-Man. As I said earlier though, I feel like when you have red and black, you need to limit the amount of red on the tighter spaces of the costume, and in this instance, they've actually put more red on the arms than there was with the blue, and the red on the arms definitely works better with the blue than it does with the black. I will say the black version does look a bit better, but I think it just looks a bit less brash. I don't know, I've never really been a fan of how the Ben Reilly costumes red sections on the torso are like this massive box, which create almost like this sort of a vest shape on him. It doesn't have the flow or the elegance of the original Steve Ditko Spider-Man design. Okay, this one here looks like the kind of suit Spider-Man would wear if he went snowboarding. I'm guessing this was earlier in development, as the stripe structure on it is much closer to the early Civil War suit that wasn't used, as is the fact that we've got raised webbing and the John Romita Sr. spider on the chest. The blue on this one is so baby blue though that it almost looks chrome. We've kind of gone from one extreme to another here. We've had Spider-Man in red and black, and now it's just BAM! This. And there's kind of a spiky sort of a look to the red section on the torso, which definitely makes me feel like this Spider-Man is for snowboarding. If we dialed down this blue a significant pinch and put some white sections on it, it could look really cool. Maybe make the webs a little brighter. This kind of feels like an early 2000s sort of a Spider-Man design. This is the SSX tricky version of Spider-Man, I'd say. I can appreciate that they were trying to go for a more traditional design for this one than previous designs on this list. Heck, this is one of the most traditional ones we've had yet, and that's kind of weird to me. But yeah, no, this one doesn't really work for me. I don't know where in development this one took place, like whether this was intended to be a suit Tony Stark would make or not, because it really doesn't look to me like the kind of suit Tony Stark would make. Maybe in his piping hot mess stage that he was at in Iron Man 3. Remember when he made the Iron Man suit with the flames on it? I think it was called the Hot Rod. Maybe he's just like, hey, this is something I made while I was making the Hot Rod armor. I was going through a phase, you want it? And then Peter's just like, wow, that's so cool, thanks, Mr. Stark! This design here feels like it's kind of tying a number of different designs on this list together. You've got kind of the Superior Spider-Man vibe in the way that the red section cuts off, giving way to black. You've got the raised webbing and the John Romita Sr. Spider, and a very similar design, sort of an aesthetic to what we had with the SSX Tricky Spider-Man, which we saw previously. It looks okay, but I'm glad they didn't go with it because it looks a little over-designed, and I don't like the black to tear through the costume quite this much. And then we have this suit here, which kind of feels like the SSX Tricky Spider-Man, but with the baby blue changed to the other extreme, it is now in black instead, which definitely looks a lot better. I'm still not big on the red section being as sort of wavy as it is, and I do think color balance was certainly a factor here. And then there's just that really tiny chest spider on there, which almost looks just a little bit Raimi inspired. Overall, not jumping for joy over it, but it's not the worst I've ever seen. The hands, though, look like something of a design element that was brought back for the Far From Home suit, and I'm really glad because I do like the fingerless gloves kind of a look on Spidey. It's clear that they made a number of attempts to really incorporate that sort of a look onto their Spider-Man, and I'm glad they made it work for Spider-Man Far From Home. It's one of my favorite elements of that design. So this design here is very similar to the first design we looked at on this list, but it's certainly very different. The spider is a lot less round and a lot more horizontal, more like a set of stripes that stretches across the chest. And what's interesting is we can see at the left leg, you can see how the red kind of stretches out to the back, and I'm guessing that would form the back spider. That has the potential to be pretty dang elegant, but personally it's not what I would be looking for in a Spider-Man redesign. It's okay. And once again, we have that design in black, but I definitely prefer it in blue in this case. It definitely gives it more layers when it's in blue. Okay, this here I love. This definitely would have been game for consideration had I been involved. This feels like a very functional, timely update to the original classic Steve Ditko Spider-Man. It's very much the original Spider-Man. It's red and black. I would still take away the cutoff where the belt comes in, and I'd certainly prefer if the spider emblem on the chest was a bit more Ditko shaped with the legs, but overall it looks great. I guess I'd also make the eyes the white version as opposed to the mirrored one. But this is definitely something I would consider if I were to do my own take. This next one incorporates the Symbiote Spider onto the classic red and blue Spider-Man costume. And to be honest, I think the Symbiote Spider should stay on the symbiote suit. Otherwise, it kind of needs something in there to cut up all of that blue. The Symbiote Spider was also meant to look kind of imposing, which well, it doesn't contrast well with the rest of the very friendly neighborhood Spider-Man look that's going on for the rest of the suit. And it kind of makes Spider-Man's chest look a little bit droopy. I can appreciate what they were going for, but the Symbiote Spider belongs on the symbiote suit. Do we have a black version of it though? No, we actually instead have a metallic version, where the red is darker, the blue is darker, and it's just an overall more metallic look for the suit. I'm guessing this was some kind of precursor to the Iron Spider in some ways. And as I say, I really do think the Symbiote Spider works best on the symbiote suit. But I can really appreciate what they were trying to do here, and it is very inspired, as many of the costumes on this list are. It really does come across that Ryan Meenading loves Spider-Man and loves the various designs that he's had over the years, and wanted to kind of find a way to make a definitive Spider-Man that kind of encompasses a little bit of what we all love. But I definitely prefer the less is more sort of approach they went for in the end, which was a very John Romita-esque Spider-Man suit, but with the black stripes on it, which make it feel kind of uniform with the MCU and their very modern sort of look, their very contemporary look. And finally, we have this piece of concept art, which I guess was a concept for maybe a promo kind of an artwork, as we can see Ned Leeds, Liz Allen, and Iron Man here, as well as the Vulture in the back there too, and it's got that very high school look about it that we had in the film. The artwork here though isn't pure Homecoming Spider-Man. It actually looks like a hybrid between Spider-Man's unused Civil War costume and the Homecoming suit. As you can see on his left arm, he's got the red outline around the red section, which is much more consistent with his Civil War unused suit, as well as the raised webbing, the use of the John Romita Sr. Spider on the chest, and how much more angular the cuts in the red sections are. But as well as that, it's got the stripes on it like the Homecoming suit, so it's kind of like a hybrid between the two. I must say, I really do hope that unused Civil War suit doesn't go completely abandoned and that we do see it someday. But for now, I'm very pleased with the much slicker, less fussy Spider-Man suits we've been given. So that brings us to the final piece of concept artwork, which is obviously the suit that was used in Spider-Man Homecoming as well as Captain America Civil War. It's very back to basics Spider-Man, and they keep it slick. There's no cuts between the belt section, there's no crazy wavy lines in the red sections, and the spider on the chest is small and subtle and actually very nicely designed. It kind of feels like a tech spider logo. Kind of reminds me of Apple. It's kind of like if Jonathan Ives made a Spider-Man logo. And being as this Spider-Man costume is made by Tony Stark, that makes a lot of sense. No color swamps this costume too much though. as we've got these really nice black stripes going consistently throughout the costume, which really complement the musculature. It's a very, very minor departure from classic Spider-Man, but one that definitely complements the look. It genuinely feels like Ryan Mienerding's final design for Spider-Man. It feels like the kind of thing that maybe Steve Ditko saw fly past his window one day, and that's when he got designing his Spider-Man. This looks how Spider-Man would look in real life if he were a man with a functioning suit. And I couldn't think of a better initial look for this Spider-Man. It is just absolutely perfect. What do you guys think? Which suit from this list was your favorite? Comment below and discuss, and as always, if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it, don't forget to click subscribe, hit the like button, and in the description below are links to my Patreon and my Discord server. Channel Pup has been growing more than I could ever have anticipated over this very short space of time, and I'm absolutely honored to see so many viewers participating in discussions and really enjoying my little projects here. But it's not without its obstacles. I'm currently a student studying film and television, and if I want to afford the general costs that come with living, unfortunately YouTube revenue just can't always cut that cheese. I recently moved in with my girlfriend's family, but this is not a permanent thing, it's just for the summer. And last year I've done the whole act of balancing YouTube, balancing a job, and balancing university, and trust me, the content suffers every single time. So to support this channel to maintain the same quality of content and upload schedule, and to just keep making the stuff you guys really seem to be enjoying, I really do urge you to check out my Patreon link in the description below. And in return, you can get early access previews to the special Channel Pup events such as Marvelous Tales of Spider-Man Episode 2, as well as my upcoming Patreon exclusive playlist, Pup's Project Room, which is all unlockable with a pledge of just $1 or more. Now, the world's a tricky place. Not everybody is made of money, and that's fine. Just please be here for my videos. Please don't stop coming back to join me on these discussions, because it means so much to me, guys, really. Well, I guess I best be hitting the old dusty trail. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I've been Channel Pup, and I'll think of a better catchphrase next time. Now please leave me alone!